Hello, I'm Emma. My life took an unexpected turn when I married Henry, a wonderful man who was raising his daughter, Madison, on his own. Madison was only 8 years old when I joined their family, stepping into the shoes left empty since her mother departed when she was a toddler. I entered their lives with hopes of adding love and stability, but things didn't exactly unfold as I'd envisioned. The first time I met Madison, I tried to warm up to her by offering some chocolate chip cookies, hoping to sweeten our introduction. "Hi, Madison, I've heard so much about you. Do you like chocolate chip cookies?" I asked, extending a plate toward her. She glanced at the cookies, then at me, her expression unreadable. "I guess," she replied quietly, taking a cookie but avoiding eye contact. Henry, with a sympathetic smile, whispered to me, "She's a bit shy around new people. Just give it some time, Emma." I was determined to be patient and empathetic, understanding the upheaval she must have felt, but it wasn't long before I realized her reserve was more than just shyness. Our family dynamics grew even more strained with the arrival of our son, Liam. Madison seemed to view him as an intruder, threatening her bond with her father. One night, I found Liam crying in his room. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I asked with concern. Through sobs, he told me Madison had called him a mistake and said that Daddy didn't love him. My heart sank. I confronted Madison, who fiercely retorted, "He's not my brother and you're not my mom." Henry tried to mediate, reminding Madison that I was trying to be a good mother to both of them, but it often felt like navigating a minefield. Any attempt at bonding was met with resistance or outright hostility, not just from Madison but occasionally from Henry's parents as well. I recall a Sunday dinner when Henry's mother pulled me aside and advised, "Emma, you need to try harder with Madison. She feels left out since Liam was born." It was frustrating. Despite my efforts, she seemed determined to keep me at arm's length. Henry's father added, "She's just a child, Emma. You're the adult. You need to make more of an effort." It felt like a no-win situation. Despite my best efforts, nothing seemed to work. Madison had erected a wall around herself, and I couldn't seem to breach it. As she entered her teenage years, Madison's behavior only grew more challenging. She would flout rules and talk back, and her hostility towards me intensified. It felt like every conversation could lead to an explosion. I remember one morning trying to discuss her absenteeism from school. "Madison, why weren't you in school yesterday?" I asked, attempting to maintain a calm demeanor. She just shrugged, pouring herself a bowl of cereal, and muttered, "Didn't feel like going." Despite these challenges, I wasn't ready to give up. I held on to hope that someday, somehow, we might find a way to come together as a real family, navigating through the minefield of Madison's teenage years with the hope of emerging on the other side as a united front. My life transformed dramatically when I married Henry, a kind-hearted widower with a young daughter named Madison. At 8 years old, Madison had already faced the significant loss of her mother, who left when she was just a toddler. With hopes of bringing stability and love, I entered their lives, but the reality proved more challenging than anticipated. The first time I met Madison, I attempted to make a warm introduction by offering her chocolate chip cookies. "Hi, Madison, I've heard so much about you. Would you like some cookies?" I asked, presenting her with a plate. She looked at the cookies and then back at me with an unreadable expression, murmuring, "I guess," before taking a cookie without making eye contact. Henry, with an understanding smile, whispered to me, "She's usually shy around new people. It might take a little time." My intentions were clear. I wanted to be there for her, to care and create a bond. However, Madison's initial shyness soon revealed itself as something deeper. The situation became even more complicated with the birth of our son, Liam. Madison saw him as an intruder, competing for her father's attention. One distressing evening, I found Liam crying in his bedroom. Concerned, I asked, "What's wrong, Liam?" Between sobs, he shared that Madison had told him he was a mistake and that his father didn't love him. Heartbroken, I confronted Madison. "Why would you say that to Liam?" "He's your little brother," I said, hoping to appeal to her sense of family. But her response was cutting. "He's not my brother and you're not my mom." Henry tried to help us navigate these troubled waters, constantly reinforcing that I was trying to be a supportive figure in her life. However, every effort to connect with Madison was met with resistance or outright hostility. This wasn't just confined to our home. Henry's parents also expressed their concerns. "Emma, you need to make more of an effort with Madison, especially now that Liam is here," Henry's mother advised during one family dinner, suggesting I wasn't doing enough to include Madison. As the years passed, Madison's teenage rebellion only intensified. Simple conversations would often escalate into arguments. One morning, when I noticed she had skipped school, I asked calmly, "Madison, why weren't you at school yesterday?" Her response was dismissive, didn't feel like going, as she nonchalantly prepared her breakfast. Despite these setbacks, my resolve to make things work never wavered. One particularly trying evening, when Madison's coldness had particularly stung, Henry attempted another heart-to-heart with her. "Madison, Emma cares about you. She's trying to help," he said earnestly. But Madison's response remained bitter. "She's not my mom, Dad. Stop trying to make her something she's not." The challenges extended beyond just our immediate family. During gatherings, Henry's mother would often pull me aside to critique my approach, urging me to be more understanding, while his father would remind me, "She's just a child. You need to keep trying." Caught in the emotional crossfire, young Liam once asked in confusion, "Why does Madison hate us, moms?" I held him close, shielding him from the truth as best as I could. "She doesn't hate us, honey. She's just struggling to adjust," I reassured him, though I doubted my own words. Madison's behavior became increasingly personal and targeted, and I often found myself wondering if I was the reason for the discord. Many sleepless nights were spent pondering what more I could do and how I could reach out to her in a way I hadn't yet tried. Then, one day, the situation escalated when I received a call from the local police station. "Mrs. Michael, this is Officer Grayson. We've detained Madison for vandalism," the officer informed me. Shocked and embarrassed, I rushed to the station, where I found Madison sitting defiantly. The reality of our strained relationship was clearer than ever as I approached her, realizing the depth of the challenges we still faced. As I neared her, she lifted her head, her face etched with annoyance rather than any hint of guilt. "Madison, what were you thinking?" I tried to maintain a calm tone, but her reaction only heightened my worry. With an eye roll and a voice dripping with sarcasm, Madison retorted, "Oh, relax, Emma. It's not like I killed someone. We just sprayed some paint, no big deal." I was astounded. "Not a big deal, Madison. This is illegal. You could be in serious trouble." Standing up, Madison snorted dismissively. "Well, I'm not. Can we go now? This place is so depressing." The ride home was shrouded in tense silence. Alone, with Henry away on business, I felt the weight of handling this crisis. Later that evening, with Liam asleep, I phoned Henry, my voice trembling. "We have a serious problem with Madison," I confessed. "I know, Emma," Henry replied, his voice weary. "The school has already called me a few times. What's happened now?" "She was detained by the police today, Henry, for vandalism," I explained, the gravity of the situation thick in the air. There was a heavy pause. "Emma, I don't even know what to say. We need to get her help, therapy, counseling, something." "She's spiraling out of control," I insisted, desperation seeping into my voice. Henry sighed, his tone laden with defeat. "Okay, I'll be back in 3 days. We'll sort this out." Hanging up, I felt a flicker of relief, but mostly dreaded the challenging discussions ahead. When Henry finally confronted Madison about therapy, her reaction was explosive. "I'm not going to any shrink," she snapped, her eyes fiery. "You can't make me." Henry, trying to keep his composure, responded, "It's not about making you, Madison. It's about helping you." Madison scoffed loudly. "Help me? Please. You just want to dump me on someone else because you can't deal with me." "That's not true, Madison, and you know it. We're worried about you," Henry replied, patience thinning. Abruptly standing, Madison pushed her chair back noisily. "Save it, Dad. I'm not your little project. I'm out of here." With that, she stormed out, the door slamming behind her. She fled to her grandparents' house, refusing to come home or speak to us. Henry and I were left in shock and helplessness, our family seemingly unraveling. At the heart of it was Madison, a teenage girl we felt we were losing, no matter our efforts. The day she rejected our rules entirely and left for her grandparents, our home felt desolately empty. Sitting with Henry, the silence heavy around us, he kept checking his phone. "I just can't believe she'd just leave like this," he expressed, a mix of frustration and disbelief in his voice. Exhaling deeply, I felt a whirlwind of emotions brewing. "Henry, she's out of control. We can't let her walk all over us. It's not right." Henry looked defeated. "I know, Emma. I know. But what can we do? She just isn't listening." Determined, we decided to call Henry's parents. However, the conversation quickly soured. "Mom, this is Henry. We need to talk about Madison," he began, striving for calm. His mother quickly jumped to Madison's defense. "Oh, Henry, she's just so distraught. She feels like Emma's pushing her away, trying to send her to a therapist like she's some sort of problem," she explained. I couldn't stay silent. "That's not it at all. She's been getting into trouble, and we're truly worried about her." The conversation was tense, a reflection of the strained relations and the difficult path ahead in reaching Madison and mending our family. I sighed as I watched my patience unravel. Henry's father interjected with a tone edged in frustration. "Emma, you just don't understand her. She's sensitive and you've been quite stern with her." I felt my temper rise. "Too stern? She's been rebelling, breaking rules. We're merely trying to steer her right." "Well, she's with us now. We'll handle it our way," Henry's mother countered dismissively. Henry and I shared a glance filled with frustration and helplessness. "You're just going to let her skip school and associate with questionable influences?" Henry questioned, his voice escalating with concern. "She's just navigating a phase. She'll settle," his father replied dismissively, downplaying Madison's troubling behavior. After the call, our sense of helplessness deepened. It seemed as if Madison had everyone wrapped around her finger, while we appeared as villains for setting limits. In the days that followed, Madison's absence loomed large, her room collecting dust, a stark reminder of the growing divide within our family. Despite sending money to Henry's parents for Madison's upkeep, it felt futile, like casting funds into a void without seeing any positive changes, just a silent endorsement of her defiance. One evening, as I tucked our son Liam into bed, he looked up at me, his expression filled with bewilderment. "Mom, why did Madison leave? Doesn't she like us anymore?" I stroked his hair softly, my own emotions swelling. "Liam, it's complex. Madison's grappling with a lot right now, but remember, we love her, and we're here for her whenever she's ready." Exiting Liam's room, the weight of our fractured family hit me. We were divided, not by distance, but by defiance and misunderstandings, with Madison at the core, a girl I once hoped to embrace as my daughter, now a stranger under a different roof. For years, our home had been eerily serene without Madison's chaotic presence. Then, unexpectedly, she returned. Henry and I were in the kitchen when she entered, her demeanor confident, almost defiant. "Hey," she greeted nonchalantly as if her years of absence were mere days. "Madison, what are you doing here?" Henry asked, his face etched with surprise. "I've got news. I'm getting married," she announced, a smug smile curling her lips. Henry and I exchanged a look of shock mixed with cautious hope. "That's wonderful, Madison. Congratulations," I managed, though skepticism lingered. "Yeah, thanks. But here's the thing, I need money for the wedding," Madison stated bluntly, getting right to the point. Henry's face tightened. "Money, Madison? You vanished for years, and now you return just to ask for money?" Madison rolled her eyes. "Come on, Dad. It's not like you can't spare it. It's not much I'm asking for." The tension in the room spiked. "Madison, it's not merely about the money. You can't just reappear and expect us to just open our wallets," I interjected. "Emma," Madison snapped, cutting me off, her tone dismissive. I'm not asking for your opinion. I'm asking Dad for a favor. I was taken aback by her audacity. Madison, we're a family. We make these decisions together, I asserted firmly. She looked at Henry, her expression softening slightly.
Dad, please.
It's my wedding. I just want it to be perfect. Henry sighed, running his hand through his hair. We'll think about it, Madison. This interaction left us all wrestling with a mix of emotions, navigating the delicate balance between family ties and personal grievances. But you can't just expect us to hand over the money without discussing it first, I said, as Madison's demeanor shifted, perhaps realizing that her direct approach wasn't effective. I know, I'm sorry, she admitted, softening. I just really want my wedding to be special. After she left, Henry and I had a long, serious talk. Maybe this is a chance for us to mend things, I suggested, feeling a mix of hope and caution. Henry nodded, albeit slowly. Maybe, but we're not just giving her a blank check. We need to be involved in the planning to ensure the money is spent wisely. Despite Madison's upfront manner, I saw this as an opportunity to close the gap that had grown between us. Perhaps we could start afresh with her. Yet, as I lay in bed that night, a nagging unease took hold. Madison's sudden return and her request felt like the calm before another storm. As the wedding day approached and whirlwinds of preparation swept through, Henry and I decided to contribute generously to her wedding fund, hoping it would be a step toward repairing our strained relationship. However, a shocking turn of events occurred just days before the wedding. I called the wedding planner to check on the preparations. Hi, this is Emma Michael, Madison's stepmom. I'm just calling to check on the wedding preparations, I said, trying to sound casual. The wedding planner's voice was tense and hesitant. Oh, Mrs. Michael, yes, the preparations are going well, but what? I pressed, a knot forming in my stomach. There was a pause, and then she revealed, I'm not sure how to say this, but Madison has made some changes to the guest list. Changes to the guest list? What kind of changes? I asked, my voice struggling to remain steady. The planner's voice was low, almost apologetic. She's removed you, Mr. Michael, and Liam from the list and added her biological mother. I felt as if I'd been punched in the gut. Her mother? The one who left her? Yes, and there's something else, the planner continued, her voice hesitant. The budget for the wedding, it's significantly less than the amount you gave her. Stunned into silence, I confronted Henry with the news. His reaction was one of disbelief, then growing anger. That ungrateful, Henry started, his fists clenched. Henry, calm down, I urged, though I shared his outrage.
We need to talk to her about this.
When we finally got Madison on the phone, the conversation was far from pleasant. Madison, why did you remove us from the wedding guest list? Henry demanded, his voice tight with anger. Madison's response was cold and matter-of-fact. Because I don't want your wife there. This is my day, and I'll have who I want. And what about the money? I asked, struggling to keep my composure. You spent only a fraction of what we gave you. That's none of your business, she snapped back. You gave me the money. It's mine to use how I see fit. We were at a loss for words, reeling from the audacity of her actions. Henry, in a rare display of fury, made a decision. We're taking back our money, Madison. We won't support this deceit, he declared, his voice resolute. You can't do that, Madison yelled, her voice shrill with panic. We can and we will, Henry responded firmly, signaling an end to our tolerance for her manipulation. Henry's voice was firm as he addressed Madison. You've crossed a boundary. The call ended abruptly with Madison throwing a barrage of insults our way before she hung up. Standing by his principles, Henry stopped payment on the wedding checks, effectively derailing the planned nuptials. Despite our attempts to reconnect and heal the breach, Madison's behavior made it painfully evident that some divides were too vast to bridge. The repercussions of the aborted wedding swept through our family with devastating intensity. Madison's reaction was explosive and acrimonious. She appeared at our doorstep, her features twisted in fury, accusing us venomously. You've ruined everything, she exclaimed, her eyes aflame. This was supposed to be my special day, and you've shattered it. You were dishonest with us, Henry countered calmly, despite the mounting pressure. You misled us about the wedding details and the finances. What were you expecting? I expected you to step aside and let me have my day, she retorted, her hands clenched. You pushed us away from your wedding, Madison, and you appropriated the funds for yourself. I tried to explain. I earned that after enduring years with you. She snapped back, her words sharp as knives. The confrontation escalated until, overwhelmed by anger, Madison stormed out, swearing never to forgive us. After she left, Henry and I faced the daunting task of picking up the pieces. Matters worsened when we got a distressing call from Henry's parents, who initially blamed us for the wedding disaster. However, the conversation soon took an unexpected turn. Emma, Henry, there's something you need to know, Henry's mother revealed shakily over the phone. After Madison left, we discovered she had taken some of my jewelry, pieces of significant value. Henry was speechless at first, then managed to muster. She stole from you? His voice was tinged with disbelief. Yes, his father confirmed sadly. We never imagined she would do something like this. Will you report it? I inquired, my voice a mix of worry and astonishment. No, we can't bring ourselves to file a report against our granddaughter, but we're deeply hurt, his mother admitted, her voice faltering. The betrayal was difficult to digest. It was one thing for Madison to direct her anger toward us, but to deceive her grandparents was beyond comprehension. As the weeks passed without any communication from Madison, Henry held on to a sliver of hope that she might realize her errors and reach out. Yet I remained skeptical. Henry, do you genuinely believe she'll return after all this? I asked one quiet evening as we sat in our living room. Looking out the window with a distant gaze, Henry replied, I'm not sure, Emma. I hope she does. I hope she sees the wrongs she's done and seeks to amend them. I exhaled, weighed down by uncertainty. I'm not sure she ever will, Henry. It seems the Madison we once knew is long gone. Henry nodded solemnly, accepting the painful truth. Perhaps you're right. Despite everything, she remains my daughter, and I can't abandon hope. As time moved on, the silence from Madison settled into a new normal. We received no updates about her whereabouts or how she was faring. Henry's parents were also left out of the loop, their feelings of betrayal mixed with concern for their granddaughter's well-being. At home, life continued. Liam grew older, and we poured our energies into ensuring he felt loved and secure. However, the shadow of Madison's past actions still loomed over us, a constant reminder of the unresolved issues and emotional scars within our family. I often found myself reflecting on Madison, pondering where she might be and what she was doing. My emotions were tangled, a mix of anger, disappointment, and a faint trace of concern. Henry clung to hope, but deep down, I harbored doubts about whether Madison would ever come back to us or seek the help she so desperately needed. The uncertainty was challenging, but it didn't extinguish the faint spark of hope that someday she might realize her mistakes and make an effort to mend the strained bonds. As difficult as it was, we tried to focus on the present, supporting Liam and each other, while leaving a door open for Madison, should she ever choose to return.
My husband Owen and I are in our second year of marriage. I wasn't strong at a lot of things, but I was a good cook. Your cooking is really delicious, he once said. That compliment on the lunch I made for our first date was what made me fall for him. After 6 months of dating, we got married, and I left my job to be a full-time housewife. My father-in-law passed away about a year ago, so now it's just the three of us with Owen and my mother-in-law. I was hoping we could live alone as newlyweds, even for a short while, but I couldn't refuse when he said, Mom's been feeling vulnerable since Dad passed away. Soon after we started our married life, I realized my mother-in-law didn't like me. I had seen bullies at my old job, but she was worse. She would always find fault with whatever I did. If I was cleaning, she would point out every little spot I missed and say, "What's this brown spot? Can't you see it?" Once she forced me to remove an unremovable stain from the floor and made me wipe it. I was not allowed to be interrupted from housework until Owen came home from work. The mother-in-law would wake me up in the middle of the night and demand, "We're almost out of plastic wrap. Go and buy some now. Otherwise I won't be able to sleep just thinking about it." Since the grocery store was closed, I had to run to the closest convenience store. If I tried to wake Owen, she would explode in anger, saying, "How dare you wake your tired husband? House chores are the wife's job." Just to shut her up, I had no choice but to obey. These midnight calls were physically exhausting, but having my things thrown away or hidden was even worse mentally. "I don't know where your stuff is. Maybe you left it somewhere," she would say whenever I couldn't find my belongings. "It's awful to blame others for your own mistakes," she added. I can never forget how shocked I was when I found my favorite cardigan in the trash can. A few days later, when I told Owen what happened, he just sighed heavily. "Well, you can just buy a new one," he said. I also tried in vain to persuade him to have a word with her. Not knowing what else I could do, I bought a safe with the money I'd saved before I married Owen. I kept my belongings out of her sight, especially my valuables, which I stored in the safe. "It's crazy to distrust your own family like you do. I'd like to see the face of the person who raised you." Her harsh tone intensified. Every time she opened her mouth, I had to brace myself for the inevitable verbal attack. She would criticize every meal I cooked, too bland or no taste at all. When I tried making the taste stronger, she complained it was too spicy. I couldn't help asking my husband for his opinion on the taste, as I wasn't sure about my cooking skills any longer. "My mom has very strict food preferences. I think it's delicious," he said. Cooking, once a joy, became a chore. After a year of being bullied by my mother-in-law, I had an epiphany. My staying home all the time was the problem. Realizing this, I decided to start working part-time. I quit my job to be a housewife as requested by Owen when we got married. But if I had foreseen that staying home would be so painful, I wouldn't have left her so easily. Despite a slight gap in my career, I was valued for my quick learning skills at my part-time job, and it simply felt good to be praised again. However, as I spent less time at home, my mother-in-law began to focus her harassment during breakfast and dinner times. She used to eat despite her complaining, but then began leaving most of the food untouched, barely taking a bite before leaving the table. I can't even remember how many times she accidentally knocked over her soup bowl. When I swallowed my pride and asked her what was wrong with the meal, she'd laugh, saying, "You think asking will solve everything, don't you? Why don't you try thinking for yourself?" she asked mockingly. I was left alone to clean up her leftovers at the dinner table. But one day my mother-in-law really crossed the line. While we were having dinner, she suddenly stood up, took her plate in her hand, and headed to the kitchen. As I looked up in surprise, our eyes met, and she smirked. What is she up to? I thought. By the time I realized what was happening, she had already thrown the meal I made into the trash can. "This is such an awful-looking meal. Dog food would even look better than this," she scoffed. I looked at Owen in disbelief, but he just ignored me and continued eating. I just couldn't believe what I saw, so I rushed to the trash can. I opened its lid and looked at the ruined food. "This is terrible," I exclaimed. I turned around to see Owen, but he wouldn't even look at me. "She probably wasn't feeling well," was how he dismissed his mother's actions. "How could she throw the food away right in front of the person who made it?" I said frustratedly. As I became more upset, Owen scratched his head in annoyance. "Look, I have work tomorrow. Unlike you with your part-time job, I'm a full-time employee working hard from morning to night," he uttered. "What's wrong with doing a part-time job?" I objected. "I work, cook at home, and then have my cooking thrown away by your mother," I added. My voice broke with emotion and he sighed deeply. "Claire, you're becoming a nag. Mom's probably irritated by your nagging too, you know? And if it's that bad, then you shouldn't be cooking anymore," he suggested. After saying that, Owen walked into his bedroom, leaving me staring at his back in disbelief. I finally realized that he didn't care about me at all. Something inside of me just snapped. The next day, I prepared breakfast as usual and let both Owen and my mother-in-law know their breakfast was ready. Owen sat down to eat, but my mother-in-law grabbed her plate and said, "Not even a dog would eat this in the morning." Then she threw her breakfast in the trash can. Without a word, I stood up and took away the breakfast I prepared for Owen. "What are you doing?" they both exclaimed. I looked at them innocently and replied, "Well, since your mother said a dog wouldn't even eat this, you shouldn't be eating it. I will take responsibility for what I have made and eat it myself," I firmly stated. "No, I didn't say that," Owen protested. "But you didn't deny what your mother said, did you?" I asked insistently. Owen opened his mouth but seemed unable to find anything to say. "Claire, stop talking nonsense and make Owen's breakfast," my mother-in-law commanded. I looked straight at her with a smile. "I'm very sorry that I've been serving you the sort of food that a dog wouldn't even eat. Don't worry, I won't cook for you ever again," I snapped. I grabbed my knife and fork, finished eating breakfast, and stood up. "Wait, Claire, what about my breakfast?" Owen asked. "Eat whatever you like," I replied indifferently. Then I left the house quickly. I usually return home around 5 p.m., but on that day, I had a few things to do after work. By the time I got home, it was already past 8 p.m. "Oh, you're very late. We've been waiting for you. Really, where on earth have you been?" Owen and my mother-in-law complained, looking very hungry. "Oh, haven't you two eaten yet? I already had my dinner," I replied. My mother-in-law's face turned red with surprise and anger. "How dare you eat alone?" she asked angrily. "Well, I did say I wouldn't cook for you anymore, or were you looking forward to my terrible cooking?" I inquired with a smirk. "How dare you talk back to me like that?" The mother-in-law flared up. She slammed the table in despair, but then quickly came to her senses as a brilliant idea popped into her head. "If you're not cooking, then return the food money. Owen has been paying for all the living expenses, so you should pay him back every penny you spend on your food," she said enthusiastically. I couldn't help but laugh at what she just confidently said. "What's so funny?" she demanded. "Since I started working part-time, I've been paying not just for food, but all living expenses." It was Owen's suggestion. Owen said to me, "Mom isn't happy about your working, but if you pay the living expenses, it might calm her down." It had been over a year since I started part-time work. That means I had been covering the living expenses for the last half of our married life, I concluded. My mother-in-law, apparently unaware of this, looked shocked and turned to Owen. "Is that true, Owen?" she questioned. "Well, you wanted more pocket money, so—" Owen, with a pitifully soft voice, making excuses, saying that I was providing the living expenses, while he used his own money for his mother's needs and pocket expenses. "You seem to have been spending quite a lot on extravagant meals," I told my mother-in-law. "What?" she wondered. "In the mailbox, I found a flyer for regular customers at some lavish restaurant," I replied. I had thought my mother-in-law made her own lunch, but after seeing the flyer, I had a suspicion and found some receipts from that restaurant in a trash can. "Shouldn't the proper thing be to pay back all the living expenses I've provided?" I asked. They listened in silence, not knowing what to answer. After all, it was my hard-earned money, and I continued. "Don't worry, I'll be sure to bill you properly." With a full smile, I said to my mother-in-law, who was trembling with anger, "Hey, what do you mean by billing?" Breaking the silence, my husband said. Owen, perhaps sensing something, turned pale and stood up. "I want a divorce, and of course I'll make sure I ask for alimony," I retorted. "Divorce?" he muttered in shock, but soon realized something and brightened up. "Do you think you can afford to live on your own with what you earn from your part-time job?" he asked with a smirk. "About that part-time job, I've been offered a full-time position," I responded firmly. "What?" Owen asked, discouraged. "I've also decided where I live," I added. My actual plan was to commute from my parents' home for a while, but what I said seemed to give him quite a shock. "I'll get my lawyer to handle the proceedings from now on," I concluded. Leaving those words behind, I went to my bedroom and grabbed the luggage I had packed the night before. Owen seemed to be in a state of shock and was still standing beside the dining table. I ignored him and walked past him. "Claire, I'm sorry." My husband started to apologize. I stopped and turned around. "Sorry for what?" "What do you mean, what? It was hard to take sides between you and Mom. I never said anything bad about your cooking, did I?" He excused himself. He didn't understand anything at all. In the end, I truly realized I had been blind. It's not about taking sides. You chose to say nothing when food was being thrown away, and when I was being harassed by your mother over and over. Despite my pleas, you never helped me. Your playing the victim doesn't change the fact that you hurt me, I reproved him. Owen started crying bitterly. Realizing the gravity of his sorrow, I quickly glanced at the pathetic man and headed towards the front door. As I reached for the door, my mother-in-law called out to stop me. I never intended for things to go this way. I just wanted to give you a little advice, although I admit it went too far at times, she said. I was amazed at how oblivious she was to the severity of her actions. I've looked after you all these times, and it's disappointing that the last thing I hear from you is such an excuse-like response. From now on, you won't have to worry about being caught for spending a lot of money on delicious meals, I finished. My mother-in-law stood frozen, her eyes wide open as if her breath had stopped. I returned to my parents' house. They warmly welcomed me as they were already aware of my situation. According to my lawyer, everyone in the neighborhood knew that my mother-in-law was incapable of household chores. Apparently, my father-in-law did his own housework while he was still alive. After his passing, Owen, now my ex-husband, and his mother lived on takeaways and eating out. To them, I was a convenient housekeeper to exploit. The news about our divorce quickly spread throughout the town. Eventually, it was known to the bosses and colleagues of Owen, causing him considerable embarrassment. Owen and his mother are now in financial trouble, having hardly saved any money and squandering it all, and are panicking over the alimony they owe me. Now that everybody knows about their mistreatment of me, finding a new housekeeper has become impossible. They can't even afford the kind of meals they used to have. Owen, unrelenting, kept texting and asking me if we could get back together. I also received text messages from my mother-in-law full of excuses, but they were repetitive and uninteresting, so I stopped reading them. Now I enjoy cooking for my family, making sweets and baking cakes on weekends. I often share them with my colleagues. Surrounded by those who appreciate what I make, I believe that will help me restore my confidence in cooking. With this new hope, my heart swells with anticipation. I'm Violet, 37 years old, and I've been married to my husband Brandon for 13 years. Currently, we live together as a family of 4, including our daughter Amy and my mother-in-law. A few years ago, after my father-in-law passed away, we began living with my mother-in-law in her home. Unfortunately, this state of affairs was far from peaceful. Shortly after we moved in, my mother-in-law started pestering me with questions about dinner. Is dinner ready? How long are you planning to make everyone wait? She'd complain as I was cooking, coming into the kitchen, and even tasting the food. This pot roast has no flavor. It's awful, she'd say. I'd reply, I thought I had seasoned it well. She'd retort, how could you taste it and still have it turn out like this? You are really bad at cooking. Brandon and Amy must feel so pitiful with this food. I'm sorry, Brandon must be having a hard time with such a useless wife. Hurry it up and set the table, she instructed. Despite her constant claims, she never helped with preparing dinner. In fact, she left all the household chores to me and lounged around during the day. When dinner was finally ready and the whole family sat down to eat, Brandon and Amy praised the pot roast that my mother-in-law had earlier criticized, saying, "This pot roast is delicious, and yeah, Mom, it's tasty." Then my mother-in-law said, "Yes, indeed, the seasoning is just right," completely contradicting her earlier criticism. Despite her harassment and nasty commands towards me, she always spoke kindly to Brandon and Amy, probably not wanting them to dislike her. "Violet is really good at cooking," she'd say in front of them. "Today, Violet did all the housework considering my health. She is truly a capable wife. Isn't that right, Violet?" She praised me. In truth, my mother-in-law had just forced all the household responsibilities onto me. As I attempted to deny it, my mother-in-law kicked my leg under the table where no one else could see. Despite her blatant attitude, Brandon thanked me with a beaming smile, believing that I was always kind to his mom. This was very far from the truth, and I could not hide my bewilderment. But Brandon remained unaware of her harassment. He genuinely cared for his mother, and after his father passed away, he became even more concerned for her well-being. I couldn't bring myself to speak ill of my mother-in-law to Brandon, who loved her deeply. His affection for her also made it impossible for me to confide in him about the situation. When it was decided that we would live with my in-laws, Amy, our daughter, was delighted. She loved her grandma, and they were very close, always playing and taking baths together. Mother-in-law's harassment escalated when I came back from shopping one day and found the room in disarray. "Mother-in-law, what happened? Why is everything in such a mess?" I asked, genuinely surprised. She replied smugly, "I couldn't find something, and before I knew it, it became a mess. I knew the house had been turned upside down just because she was looking for something. It was clear that she had done it to harass me." "Sorry, I'm going to dinner with friends now. Cleanup's on you," she said, leaving me to deal with the aftermath. As expected, I ended up spending the entire day cleaning, unable to focus on anything else. When mother-in-law returned home, she remarked, "Laundry, dishes, cleaning, none of it's done," making it clear that her intent was to torment me. I clenched my fists, suppressing my anger at my mother-in-law's taunts, and quietly continued with the housework. "Hurry up, or everyone will be home soon. If Brandon realizes what an incapable wife you are, he'll surely divorce you," she sneered, never lifting a finger to help, only rushing and nagging me incessantly. As dinner remained far from ready, my frustration grew. In the end, dinner was late, and Brandon asked, looking concerned, "Are you feeling ill?" "No, it's not that," I started to explain, but when I glanced at my mother-in-law, she was glaring at me, a silent warning not to speak up. "Today has been a bit hectic," I said weakly. "Oh, I see. I'm sorry," my husband comforted me in an understanding way. "No, it's totally fine," I reassured, his kindness shining through. Mother-in-law, however, didn't find his understanding amusing. Instead, her daily harassment towards me intensified. Lately, it wasn't just about me. She began interfering in Amy's affairs, too. "You two seem to be trying to get Amy into a private middle school," she accused. "Yes, we are. Is there a problem with that?" I countered. "It's cruel to make her study late every night for exams. Stop it right now," she stated firmly. "We are not forcing her to study against her will." "Amy herself wants to go to a private middle school," I replied. "Kids should play and have fun. There's no need to force them to study now," she protested. "But working hard now will open up more options for her future, and Amy wants this. We're not forcing it on her," I insisted, standing firm against her accusations. Recently, as Amy had been studying late into the night and attending tutoring sessions, our family time had decreased noticeably, and my mother-in-law seemed displeased. "Give up on the middle school exams. It's a waste of time," she commanded one day. I couldn't hold back my anger at her disregard for Amy's feelings and her selfish remarks. "Isn't it normal to support Amy when she wants to do this?" I retorted, surprising my mother-in-law by never having objected to her before. "Amy's exams have nothing to do with you, mother-in-law," I added firmly. Frustrated and feeling like arguing would lead us nowhere, she left, stated, "Enough of this, I'm going to pick up Amy." Mother-in-law continued to harass me in front of Brandon and Amy, seemingly unable to let go of the fact that I had talked back. During dinner that day, she criticized the meal, saying, "Today's dinner looks plain. Is this all we have?" Brandon, unable to stay silent any longer, snapped at her, "Come on, Mom, don't complain about the meal that Violet made." His anger startled mother-in-law, and she quickly backpedaled, saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, that's not what I meant to say." Not wanting to escalate the situation, I brushed it off with, "It's fine." After dinner, while I was washing dishes, mother-in-law approached me and muttered, "I'll remind you of that," before retreating to her room. From then on, every day was filled with fear, wondering what she might do next. Then one day, it was the day of Amy's acceptance announcement. We nervously headed to the venue. When we checked the bulletin board, Amy's number was clearly written there. "You did it, Amy! Awesome, you got accepted! Yay!" We were all overjoyed. Amy had been studying tirelessly for months, and thanks to her relentless efforts, she had passed the middle school exams. "We have to celebrate today," I exclaimed and asked, "Amy, what would you like to eat?" "Steak," she replied, her absolute favorite. "Should we order delivery then?" I suggested, and everyone cheered in agreement. On my way home, I called the steakhouse and ordered a luxurious steak for delivery. We also decided to buy a cake, so I made a small detour, asking my mother-in-law to receive the steak delivery at the house. When I called her, she said, "Understood, I'll take care of it." Due to various detours, we were completely past lunchtime by the time we got home. We were all hungry and eagerly anticipating the steak. "I'm starving! I want to eat the steak now!" Amy exclaimed. "You're right, the steak should be here. Let's eat plenty, okay?" I reassured her. Upon our arrival home, we bumped into mother-in-law's friends as they were leaving. They all said in unison, "Thanks for the feast," and left, leaving me puzzled. I had a bad feeling and rushed inside the house. The dining table, where the steak was supposed to be, was in disarray. I asked mother-in-law, "Did you eat the steak?" To which she defiantly replied, "If it's a delivery steak, I enjoyed it with my friends at a luncheon. You'll pay for it later." "What have you done?" I yelled, utterly shocked by her audacity. "You were probably planning on ordering delivery and slacking off on housework. I won't allow that," she retorted, completely unapologetic. It was supposed to be a celebration of Amy's success, and I had informed my mother-in-law in advance that Amy's admission based on her exam results would be announced today. It seemed she had forgotten, which explained her thoughtless actions. When Amy and Brandon arrived late, Amy, having overheard our conversation in the corridor, was in tears. "I heard what Grandma said," she said, her voice choked with disappointment. Amy had been excited to share the news with her grandmother quickly, but it seemed inconceivable to her that her own grandmother had forgotten such an important day. "Mother-in-law, today was Amy's middle school acceptance announcement. How could you forget such an important day? That's awful," I explained, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief at her callousness. Mother-in-law seemed unable to hide her agitation, her lack of remorse only deepening our disappointment in her. "Why today, Violet? Why didn't you tell me earlier?" Mother-in-law's voice trembled with a mix of surprise and guilt. "I did tell you," I replied, my anger overshadowed by disappointment. I felt a strange certainty that left me too numb to be furious. Amy had worked hard and earned her acceptance. We had planned to celebrate by indulging in her favorite steak, but mother-in-law had eaten it with her friends, oblivious to the significance of the day. "I called you about the delivery, didn't I?" I challenged, hoping for some explanation. "Yes, Mom. Did you do it on purpose?" Brandon's voice carried a mix of hurt and confusion. Mother-in-law's face grew paler, her attempt to find an excuse faltering. I had suspected her harassment for a while, but now it seemed Brandon was starting to understand too. Without a word, she approached Amy, offering a weak apology and suggesting we all go to the steakhouse, insisting she would pay. Amy's response was sharp and unforgiving. "I hate Grandma," she declared, pushing mother-in-law away and fleeing to her room. The explicit refusal uttered by her granddaughter seemed to stun her mother-in-law. She stumbled, falling to the ground, unable to comprehend the magnitude of being despised by someone she loved so dearly. Afterward, I told Brandon about her continued harassment, because the burden of this secret was heavy on my heart. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he asked, a mix of guilt and concern in his eyes. "I couldn't say anything when I thought about you and Amy," I confessed, regret coloring my words. "I'm sorry I made you put up with all this time," he said, his voice heavy with remorse. "You don't have to endure this anymore." Brandon suggested we move to escape the constant torment. Amy also expressed her desire to live away from mother-in-law, providing us with a reason to leave without hesitation. On the day we moved, while I was packing, mother-in-law entered the room, her eyes reflecting sorrow and desperation. "Are you really leaving the house?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Yes," I replied. "You must be glad to be away from me," she continued, her words heavy with self-pity. "I don't exactly hate you," I replied, my voice tinged with exhaustion. "Can you please leave? You're in the way of my packing," I added. But instead of leaving, mother-in-law began to plead desperately. "Please don't leave. I'll apologize for everything. Please, I can't bear to be apart from Amy." No matter how much I explained, she wouldn't let go, clinging to me and crying, her desperation hanging heavy in the air. So I made a proposal. "Actually, we are moving to my parents' house. If you really can't bear to be apart from Amy, will you come with us?" My father, usually stern with a scary face, knew that his mother-in-law was aware of his character. I said it somewhat maliciously, thinking she would never agree. Surprisingly, she did. "I understand. That's fine with me," she said, leaving me stunned. She seemed to want to be with Amy very badly. I agreed to live together since she wouldn't harass me in front of my parents, and if she did, I could report it to my father. Brandon added, "Sorry if something happens with my mom coming along. Feel free to kick her out." So we all moved to my parents' house, and the cohabitation began. My father seemed dissatisfied that mother-in-law came with us. Of course, he knew how she had harassed me and ruined Amy's celebration. He didn't blame her directly, but his silent pressure kept mother-in-law shrinking. She spoke less and seemed downcast. When my mother and I asked for help with housework, she readily complied and worked hard. I couldn't help but laugh at her changed appearance. Life went on without any incidents for a while. But finally, my mother-in-law went to the extreme and declared to me, "I'm sick of this house. Your father is intimidating Amy, so I can't reach her." I think Brandon's attitude towards his mother became more cold because he couldn't tolerate that kind of thing either. "Amy, let's go home together," mother-in-law said, trying to forcibly pull Amy and leave the house. "Hey, mother-in-law, stop it! Can't you see Amy doesn't want to go? She'd rather be here with me than in your house," I intervened. Just then, my father arrived. "What are you doing? Knock it off!" he thundered. Frightened by my father's forcefulness, mother-in-law froze in fear. "I allowed you to live with us because you said you didn't want to be apart from your granddaughter. But if you try to take Amy against her will, I'll call the police for kidnapping," Dad firmly stated. "I didn't mean it that way," mother-in-law protested, but Amy shook off her hand and screamed, "Get out!" Even mother-in-law seemed shocked by this, dropping her shoulders and leaving the house in tears. Now she's back at her house, living a lonely life. Afterward, mother-in-law became reclusive, and it seems that even neighbors and friends are keeping their distance from her. On the other hand, every day goes smoothly in our family. Amy is studying hard at a private school, and Brandon has become very friendly with my parents, especially my father, with whom he drinks every day. I wish I had talked to Brandon earlier and moved to my parents' house. In my life, I've heard many horrible words. Of course, some of them were directed at me. "You're a single woman. You're a scumbag." But I have yet to hear an insult as bad as the one my brother-in-law used on me. I'm not going to let my brother-in-law's slanderous remarks go unchallenged. My name is Ruth Thomas. I am 38 years old, single and working. Why do I have a brother-in-law when I'm not married? That's because I'm engaged. My fiancé, Samuel, is 6 years younger than me. We met through a mutual friend and hit it off right away. I have a very hectic work schedule and often have to work on my days off. I met Samuel in the midst of such hard work, and when I am with him I can relax and spend time together. Samuel is good at cooking, sewing, and is a hard worker, all of which I am not. After we moved in together, he did housework and even cleaned my suits for me, which was very nice. "I'm so sorry, I know you're busy too," I'd said. "I've reserved a table at a nice restaurant for my next day off, so let's have dinner together." It had become a habit for me to treat Samuel to dinner like this, for the hard work he puts in every day with the money I earned from my hard work. "Don't worry about it, I can leave my job on time and I'm not nearly as busy as you. Most importantly, I do housework because I enjoy it," Samuel always says to me. Our families were planning to meet soon. We had already met each other's parents shortly after our engagement, but wanted to throw a dinner party for both families to get to know each other. Samuel has one older brother, while I have 2 younger siblings. Instead of meeting at the wedding, both families suggested getting to know each other beforehand, so we decided to bring both families together, parents and siblings included. "I'm sorry, but my brother can't come because of his work," Samuel explained. "I know you're also busy with work, so please accept my apologies," he added. "Your brother is a very talented lawyer, isn't he?" I asked Samuel, who bowed his head. "I wish I could have met him, but if he's busy, then it can't be helped. We can meet at the wedding," I continued. In fact, I wasn't too worried because I thought it was important for the couple and parents to get together, even if their siblings couldn't. "My brother can be cool to people, so even if he does come, I'm worried that he might be rude," Samuel said. He appeared tense. On the day of the party, my brother-in-law was, as it turned out, not present. Samuel looked relieved that his brother wasn't there. My brother and sister were both there, and it turned out to be an enjoyable party. My parents-in-law and I had a good time, and my siblings seemed to like Samuel, which relieved me. It was a fantastic opportunity, and I only wish I had met my brother-in-law. The day came to an end with that in mind. I never imagined that when I met my brother-in-law later, I would think he was such a rude person, and that it was a good thing I didn't meet him at the dinner party. My mother and I were at the university hospital one day. My mother wasn't feeling well, so she was referred to this university hospital for a thorough examination after visiting a clinic near my parents' house. Other than palpitations and dizziness, there was nothing to worry about, but I decided to take my mother to the hospital in case anything happened to her before the wedding. My mother, who is in her mid-60s, appears young, but she could be diagnosed with a serious illness at any time. She was concerned for me that I was putting off getting married until I was in my 40s, and I felt I owed her for raising my brothers and sisters so well. "Why don't I pay for you to have a thorough checkup, Mom?" I suggested. I had never felt so strongly before. This is what I have been earning money for. I want to assist in situations like this because I can't take time off from my family. Because the examination could not be completed in one day, we had to go to the hospital several times. The incident occurred during the second of several visits to the hospital. The university hospital was extremely crowded that day, with long lines. My mother and I were waiting for our turn with a cup of hot tea in a space away from the waiting area where we could eat and drink. My phone then rang. I thought maybe it was a work call. I left my tea with my mother and went to a location where I could take the call. It was indeed a work-related call. I got a call to see if I was going to change my name at work when I went on the family registry. I returned to my mother after the phone call and heard some yelling. What was she screaming at in the hospital? I hope my mother is all right. When I realized the yelling was aimed at my mother, I dashed over to her. My mother rose from her seat and bowed repeatedly to the man in a suit. Who is he? He was wearing an expensive-looking suit as well as a luxurious-looking watch and shoes. His slicked-back hair gave away his confidence. The man who was yelling at my mother looked like a debt collector. He didn't appear to be my mother's friend, so I inquired as to what was going on. "Excuse me for interrupting," I said. "Did my mother harm you in any way?" I asked. The man shifted his gaze to me and examined me from head to toe. She placed a cup of tea or something on the seat, and when I sat next to her, it fell and stained my suit. "What are you going to do? I have business after this," he snapped. I examined his suit more closely, and it did appear to be slightly damp. "I apologize sincerely. Let me pay for the dry cleaning," I tried to say. But the man was not satisfied with my answer. He interrupted me by shouting even louder. The man shouting inside the hospital naturally drew a lot of attention. A few nurses came out, and a crowd quickly gathered. "I'll let you off with the cleaning fee," the man said, perhaps realizing that the situation had evolved. "Do you have any contact details? How can I contact you?" he inquired. "Oh no, I didn't have my business card. Usually I always have it on standby, but not today." A security guard called out to me. "Are you all right? Is everything in order? Is there a problem?" he asked. The gentleman clicked his tongue and tossed his business card at my feet. "Make sure you call me," he said and added, "There's no point in fleeing. I have a close relationship with this hospital, and I'm sure they will share your information with me." What on earth is going on? My mother and I are both sorry, I uttered indignantly. I tried to resist, but he looked at my hand and said, "You're single at your age? Women are said to have an expiration date, but you are not only expired, you're unsold industrial waste. You're like raw garbage, a single woman." He was rude once more. As I was about to respond to the insult directed not only at me, but at my mother, the man took off running to avoid being pursued by the security guard. What's up with that impolite demeanor? I'm furious. My gut was churning with disappointment over not being able to protect my mother and the rude man's comment. I bowed lightly to all onlookers and security guards who had rushed to the scene out of concern and picked up the business card that had fallen at my feet. I was curious as to who the jerk was. I was perplexed as I read the name and title. So that's what all of this was about. I canceled the checkup and returned home, prioritizing my mother's state of mind. I'll never forget that guy. I'm sure I'll make him regret his rant against me and my mother. About a week later, I went to the courthouse. Unlike other countries, this wasn't a trivial matter like going to court over a stain on a suit. As I walked through the familiar halls, my heels clacking on the floor, I saw a man I recognized approaching from the end of the main hall. I knew it. What should I say to him? As I was thinking, he looked up at me and said, "You're the trashiest single woman from the other day, aren't you?" "You've got to be kidding me. What exactly are you doing here? This isn't the place for you," he stated defiantly. Yes, this was the same man who had assaulted my mother and me the day before. I wanted to say something rude to him right now, but the kinder side of me woke up in me. Every day I thought about how I wanted to completely destroy evil using my strong sense of justice. Oh, I'm very sorry about the other day. I believe you are Maverick Anderson of the Mitchell Law Office. I politely apologized. I didn't pay much attention to his rude outburst, remembering his business card that had been thrown at me the day before. Anderson, harboring a grudge, continued to insult me and began talking about the incident with the suit, his mouth twisting unpleasantly. After that incident, I had an appointment with a client at the hospital, he explained. And you embarrassed me. I don't understand how a trashy woman like you could stain someone's suit and then not call me back, he concluded. Anderson worked as a lawyer. Of course, we happened to meet here today by chance. Because of his loud voice, I felt eyes on me from all sides. Lawyer Anderson began taunting me in a loud voice that people in the aisles could hear. I guessed he wanted to show off. There are many men like this in the legal profession. I was shaking my head, which irritated Anderson even more. Mr. Anderson, what's with your loud voice? Said someone behind me. Someone approached me and asked, Mr. Anderson, what was wrong? When Anderson saw the man who owned the voice, he changed his tone and mumbled, Oh no, this woman. As he took a business card from his card case, the man looked up at me and gasped. The business card read, Attorney Mitchell, partner at Mitchell Law Office. This man must be Anderson's boss and the firm's CEO. As soon as he realized who I was, he began shaking and bowing at a 90-degree angle to greet me. Gosh, it's been a while, he exclaimed. Anderson, my subordinate, has been extremely rude to you. Please accept my apologies, he said. Anderson, who had no idea what was going on, said, Mr. Mitchell, what's going on? Are you familiar with this lady? This is the same asshole who ruined my suit the other day, after which I was overcharged for dry cleaning. Mr. Mitchell, who had turned blue, then grabbed Mr. Anderson by the scruff of the neck and forced him to bow. Ouch! What exactly are you doing? Anderson protested. Mitchell spoke quietly to Anderson. How dare you, Anderson? This woman is a prosecutor, and she's my former boss, Thomas, who always wins every case she takes on. Lawyer Anderson was perplexed. He couldn't believe the single woman he'd called garbage was a prosecutor. Yes, I am a lawyer. Since I was a child, I have been unable to overlook injustice. I was torn between becoming a police officer and a lawyer, and I chose the latter. I became a lawyer because I wanted to bring criminals to justice, even if I couldn't catch them with my own hands. Now, I work for the prosecution after being invited by a former colleague to advance my career. As a result, my job often requires me to be in the courtroom. By the way, Mr. Mitchell is afraid of me because I looked after him when he was a rookie. He's a serious man, but he got in trouble because the bond between mentor and novice never falters. Attorney Anderson, who had come to a halt in shock, wanted to say something, but I wouldn't let him. You've turned into a fine man, Mr. Mitchell, I said. Mr. Anderson, I will pay your cleaning bill without delay. I apologize for being so busy with work. Is that okay, brother-in-law? I added. Brother-in-law? Said Lawyer Anderson, his mouth agape. No way, Samuel's fiancé, he said aloud as he froze. I looked up at the business card he had thrown at me the other day to see if I could figure out what was going on. This rude man was indeed my brother-in-law, who missed the engagement party because of work. As I watched my brother-in-law, I noticed his face turn pale. As a lawyer, you know that comments like, a single woman is garbage, are considered insulting. I was prepared to pay for the dry cleaning, but your response was appalling. You can be sentenced to 1 year's imprisonment or a fine of no more than $3,000 or both. Which do you prefer? As I said this, I smiled. Attorney Anderson finally fell to his knees and bowed, realizing that his position was in jeopardy. Please forgive me if the press finds out about this. I'm screwed, he pleaded. I'm guessing that assertive advocates are pretty well aware of the power of the media. Sometime later, I had a successful wedding and am now doubly enjoying newlywed life. Samuel is now a full-time house husband, and I'm more able than ever to devote myself to work for my family. My brother-in-law apologized several times to my mother and me and offered to settle the case, but I decided to ask him to write off the dry cleaning bill and forget about it. I could make the money on my own. My brother-in-law didn't attend the ceremony, most likely because he felt awkward. His business has suffered significantly due to his attitude toward us, as well as complaints from other customers. I suppose bad deeds are discovered sooner or later. I promised myself that I would cherish this life so that my family and I could continue to support each other.